Hi, welcome to this part. We will look today at the S3 thumb rules. This is important to clear your certifications, whether it may be AWS Cloud Practitioner or AWS Solution Architect, Associate, or Professional. You need these concepts. I have posted a similar video on EC2 thumb rules. Please have a look at that as well. Please subscribe to my channel for more such informative contents. Let's jump into the thumb rules. This is the first one. You should always remember S3 is a storage solution. It is not a compute solution. EC2 is a compute solution and S3 is a storage solution. Let me explain you in terms of a diagram. So S3, it can store files in buckets. You see this, a diagram of a bucket. And what type of files can you store? Can you store a Word file? Yes. Can you store only Excels? No, you can store Excel. Practically, you can store anything, any file or any object you can store here. Since I use the word any, what it means is it can be some analytics data here, okay, or it can be log files. You know, there are applications which keep logging whatever activity is happening. You can log that. There can be application data, so it can be videos and pictures, or it can be backup and archival files. Now who can use this data or the objects which are stored in S3? Who can use these data sets? If you see here, artificial intelligence routines, advanced analytics routines, machine learning routines, they can be a good consumer of these data files. Now with S3, another important question to note is S3 has no limit. It is unlimited. Virtually you can store any amount of data, and that is our second thumb rule. There is no storage limit and it can be accessed from anywhere using simple REST APIs. So that means uh, we can fire a GET request and get from your laptop. Suppose you have a file in S3, you fire a GET request and you can get the file or object. So is S3 a file system? No, it is not a file system. If you see Windows Explorer, that is a file system. So in cloud, the equivalent of a file system is EFS, Elastic File Store. S3 is not an equivalent of file system. It is an object store. Object store is different than a file system. So simple rule number 3 says if you want to pull an object, you fire get, and if you want to upload an object, you fire put. These are all API commands, though you can also use AWS management console to upload a file or upload an object, download an object, and so on. See, I told you the limit is endless. This is highly scalable. When we say there is no limit, that means it is highly scalable. Today you want to store 100 objects, that is fine, but tomorrow your requirement grows up. Suppose you are a startup company. Initially your customer base was small and now your customer base increased, and so your business right now is requiring you to hold 1,000 objects. You can do that, but suppose your startup has now become full-fledged, uh, a proper business, and then you're getting a lot of customers and you have to store like 500k objects, which is fine. S3 says be my guest. So this is an advantage of S3. Rule number 5, it reduces the capex cost. You remember, if you had a bit of an introduction to finance, so you must be knowing about capex and opex. Suppose you buy a car, say a Tesla, like in this pic, that is a capex because you are paying upfront to buy that car. But if the same car you are renting from Hertz, not the same car because Hertz doesn't have Tesla, but if you're renting a car from Hertz, that's an operational cost because you have to pay them every month or based on whatever you have used for a week or 2 months and so on. So that's your operational cost. You are not paying anything upfront. You're not buying that car. Hence, cloud and something like S3 is very good for startups. They can start small. Say today they want to start and they do not have a lot of customers, so they do not want to buy or add a lot of stuff, a lot of hardware, software, and so on. But one day they become big. So if they become big, the scale up is easy and faster. They do not have to wait for months to procure hardware, ship it from somewhere. They can do it in hours. So you can virtually store any kind of data in any format. Like we saw in this diagram here, S3, you can store any type of data. You see these sets, there are some videos, pictures, some archive files, log files, some analytics data, application data coming from a database, and so on. Now let's think of a question. If I have a file or an object, I have put it in S3, what size is permitted? Can the file be of say 100 MB? I have a Word file of say 1 MB, or can I have an archive file of 1 terabyte? What is the limit? So it can be anything between 0 bytes to 5 terabytes. Okay, and what I'm saying is in a single put you can only do 5 GB. That means in a single put means you will have to, if you have a 5 terabyte and in a single put you can only do 5 GB, then you will have to do multi-part upload. Okay, so use multi-part upload for files greater than 100 MB. If you have files which are 100 MB or up to 100 MB, you can upload in a single put request. But if you have files which are greater than that, best practice is split the file and do a multi-file upload. So you don't have to split it yourself. The multi-part upload will take care of itself. Now I am jumping to thumb rule number 11 directly because I want to brief you about storage classes. Here we have storage classes in S3. Okay, what it means is these are different sort of placeholders and containers so that you can save your costs based on your requirements. So for example, S3 standard, the first thing, if you go to management console and you go to S3, so that is just your standard S3 standard where you can upload your files. But you also have provisions for S3 standard IA, one zone IA. If you think you are not going to access your files frequently, then you can put it on standard IA. If you have some backup files which are not very important and you want to save the cost of that storage, then put it on one zone IA. One zone IA is cheap because all other storage classes, it gets replicated in 3 availability zones. One zone, common sense, one zone says there is one zone, there is no 3 zone. That's why it is cheap, because it is only going to store in one availability zone. Then you have Glacier, different flavors of Glacier. Okay, remember Glacier, this is cold storage. What you mean by cold storage is I will not access this frequently or even less frequently. I will maybe do it once in 6 months, once in a year, once in 5 years, and so on. So just to summarize, S3 standard, if I want to access it every day, every 5 hours, I'll put it there. If I want to save cost, some backup files which are not very important, I want to save cost, I'll keep it in one zone IA. Now Glacier is deep storage, just like your fridge. You keep the stuff there because you want to hold it for a long time. Okay, and that's why you try to deep freeze. You don't want your data to go bad also. Now I am jumping back to thumb rule 8 because I wanted to cover the storage class topic first. So now you can see in a bucket, you can have suppose two objects. Object one, which has a storage class of standard IA, and object two, which has a storage class of one zone. Now let's ask ourselves a question. Does AWS, does it have access to view my data? It's my data, right? I don't want anybody to view it. Like Google Photos, I upload my photos. What if employees of Google are watching it, my pictures? See, anything you put on S3, Google or Amazon here, AWS, it will only track the data usage for billing, just to charge you. That's all. They don't care what are you storing there. Okay, and they would care if suppose there is some issue with law and order, and the law agencies like FBI, or in India it's CBI, so on, they want the company to share that data, then they might do it. Another question is, where does the data get stored in S3? Which region? So it is in the region that you have selected. So when you are logging into the management console, you get an option to select a region. So like I was explaining in thumb rule 11, so 13 is linked to the same. So the stuff that is changing here is, you see here, these storage classes, the data is replicated in 3 AZs, and one zone, the data is stored only in a single AZ. Now question, okay? So example, you have your development center in India and the set of users are in UK. So where should you put your S3? In which region should you create your S3? Should you create it in India, like Western India, Central India? There are 3 regions. Should you create it there, or you should create it in London? You should create it in London so that your objects are closer to the user base and they would not experience any issues of latency. Latency should always be low, not high. Low latency equals high performance. That's a thumb rule. So this is our thumb rule. Use a region which reduces data access latencies. Okay, be as close to the customer as possible. Or if you have a regulatory compliant requirement which says, for example, what can be regulatory compliance requirements? For example, GDPR, data should remain in Europe. If that is the case, then you cannot host that data in S3 in a different region. You have to be somewhere in Europe, in Germany, Switzerland, London, so on. I seriously want a day in my life when sometime in future, similar to EU, we will have something like Asia, where people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Nepal, and so on, can easily transit across the countries and work. Now again, a question time. So if I am hosting the data in S3 in UK, in London, what happens if there is some disaster, some calamity? It may be natural or it may be man-made, like terrorism, blasts, and so on. And what if that data center is off the hook? Hence we say, always build geographic redundancy for disaster recovery purposes. Okay, that's the best practice. What it means is, if your S3 bucket is in London, also make it available in Germany. So will I end up paying more for moving my data to S3 buckets? No, if you are doing the copy via the copy request. Data in cloud is usually free. Data in from your premises to AWS is free. From your premises to Azure, it's free. From your premises to Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, Alibaba Cloud, it's free. Why is it free? Because imagine you have created a startup, okay, and you want your customers to come. So will you uh, create an additional layer of charge for them to come? Then your customers won't come, right? So they want people to come to cloud, store your data, and get rid of your on-premises infrastructure. Now suppose if I have 3 AZs in a region, if I move the data from AZ1 to AZ2, will I be charged? Yes, you will be absolutely charged. Data coming in from your premises is free. Data movement across the cloud infrastructure is not free. Even data in is not free. Data out is never free, but data in is not free. So what are you paying for? You're paying for the network data transferred in across the AZs. You're paying for network data transferred out. For example, from cloud, you're taking the data out to your on-premises, or suppose you're taking the data out of, or you're taking your data from AWS cloud to Azure cloud, or vice versa, whatever that is transfer out. And then you would be charged for data requests. For example, from a on-premises, you want to get a file, okay? So you put a get request, or you're putting a put request, uh, or delete request across ACs. You will be charged, okay? Data retrieval, you would be charged across ACs. Also, you will be charged. Now, you must have seen like data centers are in developed countries like US. So you have data centers across in US, okay? Then you have your data centers across India. Now think about this. Won't the cost of hosting will be less in India compared to USA? So logically, the servers or the cloud data centers hosting that will cost less in India, and hence the S3 charges are also less in cheaper countries like India or within Africa compared to UK, US, etc. Right. Now let's think, if in the older days we used to use version control tools like Visual Source Safe or Rational Tool Concerts and so on. So does S3 support versioning of the objects? Well, the answer is yes, and this is our thumb rule 19. It supports versioning, okay? By versioning, what it means is, suppose you have a Word file, okay, and you added one paragraph today, that is your version 1.0, and tomorrow someone else adds one more paragraph and saves it, that becomes your version 1.1. So anytime, like if you do not have version control enabled, then this version will be lost. So if you think that I wanted to go to the previous version, you will not be able to do it if you do not enable version control. In S3, it is not provided by default. You have to enable it. Now, what if you're using Management Console and you upload a file? Will you be charged for it? Yes, it you will be, because uploading a file using Management Console is equivalent to a put statement in terms of API. Now think about it. You have one S3 bucket. Okay, this is your bucket. Can someone else access it? The files that you have stored, can someone else access it from some other account? Not the same account that you are using, from some other account. Yes, you can access it. Now the thing is, to access also there is a charge. AWS charges for it. So why would you pay? Because what if those 10 people you provided access to in a day, they are not smart people, okay? In a day, 10 times or 100 times they are downloading this file. They are putting a get statement. So you are charged. So what you do is you enable requester pays the bucket. That means whoever accesses the files in this bucket, they will pay the money. You don't have to pay a single penny for the access that they are doing. You only pay for the access that you are doing. That's all. Now in terms of network, there are IPv4 IPs and IPv6 IPs. You don't have to go to the depth, because a lot of time people think that, oh, I need to understand networking. No, you do not. IPv4, there was a range of number. Now since IPv4 made sense in 2005, when the number of devices were less. Now the number of devices, that is your mobile phones, smartphones, laptops, desktops, iPads, so on, it increased to like millions, that IPv4 IPs are getting exhausted. That's why they have introduced IPv6. I'm pretty sure in like 10 years from now, IPv6 will get exhausted and they might introduce IPv8. But The thumb rule here I have to say is, if the question tells you in S3 can we use IPv6 IPs, yes you can. Can we send notifications from S3? Yes you can. You can send event notification from S3. When will you send notifications? Suppose you have put an alert that whenever there is a delete happening, you should come to know that some idiot has deleted your file. So that can happen, but like, these are accidental deletes. When I mean some idiot deleted, that means it's an accidental delete. Don't take it literally. So you have other options to prevent accidental deletes. Versioning, like we discussed in the previous some thumb rules, versioning is one way to avoid accidental deletes. Okay, see, these notifications you can send to event bridge, SNS, SQS, Lambda, and so on. You can also send notifications if a lifecycle expiration is happening. For example, you have set a life cycle, like after 30 days, your file should move from S3 standard to S3 IA. And whenever that move happens, you get an event, like that is a transition event, that it is moving from one, uh, storage type to another one. Okay. Now, many times we see that whenever you try to access, so this is your cloud, suppose this one is your cloud, and this is the user. This is you are trying to access the files in S3 in your region, suppose. Okay, it goes through the internet. This is internet. These blue blocks are internet. It goes through the internet. But what if the internet is slow and you want more faster stuff? What if you don't want to just play around with word files? You are trying to upload a 5 terabyte multi-upload for a 5 terabyte archive file. What if you are doing that? So you want faster access. You cannot wait for like hours and hours for this upload to happen. So what you do is, there is something called S3 transfer acceleration. It helps you to transfer your data fast. How? Using edge locations. Now, instead of this blue box being network, your internet, these are edge locations. What it means is, there are edge servers, edge locations created by AWS. Instead of traffic following through the internet, it will follow, or it will traverse through these edge locations. And these are dedicated lines which AWS has. So no interruption, no one else is accessing the internet. It's not internet, it's just dedicated to AWS. That's why it is fast. But it is costly, it is expensive. Use it only if you have GBs or terabytes of data to be moved across continents, from Asia to USA, from USA to Europe. Okay, that is one thing. Or use it if suppose you have a centralized S3 bucket. What means is, you have this S3 bucket in US, suppose in Ohio region, you have this bucket created and it is close to the user base, but there are users in UK, there are users in France, there are users in India, there are users in London. They all access this. So the users who are in Ohio, they would not face latency issues. India people would face latency, it would be slower. People in UK, they will face latency issues, it will be slower. And that's why you should use transfer acceleration that time when you have your users split across the globe, across the continent. The beauty is, this works with multi-part uploads as well. Like we discussed, any file above 5 GB, you should use multi-part uploads. Now, in the exam, you would get scenarios where you would have to do a comparative study on. So, transfer acceleration, if the object size is less than 1 GB, then you should use CloudFront. And if it is higher than that, you should use transfer acceleration. In the exam, you will get a lot of questions, at least 2 to 3, where they will give scenarios where CloudFront is explained. A lot of answers would be CloudFront, because always remember, from a caching standpoint, CloudFront works best because it caches also. It uses fast network plus caching, and transfer acceleration is just the fast network. That's all. Now you must have heard there is a concept called Snowball. So Snowball is primarily used for petabyte scale data transport. Suppose your on premises has a lot of data, okay, and you want, your strategy is that you would cloudize everything. So you want to move this data. So there must be certain applications, databases, and imagine the data in those databases has to be moved to cloud. Now in the exam you get such questions. Okay, there are 3-4 flavors of the questions. So the question usually goes that on premises I have n number of records or n number of data, and suppose like 10 terabytes or 100 terabytes and such scenarios, and I want to move it to AWS. Should I use over the network, like uh, transfer acceleration, or should I use Snowball? Snowball is, what is Snowball? We saw here that it's a petabyte scale data transport. So you will get something like a suitcase, and that you can copy the data there, and you can then ship it through courier to AWS. And in between, if someone hacks or someone rigs of your Snowball device, the entire set is I would say encrypted. Nobody can access the data. And I also heard that a lot of these are self-destructive if someone can track that. Okay, there is a satellite chip also, so people can track where is it lost and somebody took it. And if you decide that this is in bad hands, you can auto destruct it. The data inside it gets auto destructed. And there are different flavors to this, like Snowball, snow cone. Snow cone is a smaller one, Snowball is a suitcase, and then there is a whole full truck that can come, and if you have a lot of data, it will plug to your network and it will copy the data. So this is a thumb rule. Best practice suggests that for initial loads, like suppose you have to do it first time, the first time when you are moving the data from on-premises to AWS, then you should use Snowball. Get a Snowball device, put all the data there, dispatch it, put it in AWS, and that is your one-time data move where the volume is enormous. Okay, but going forward, which is incremental, you will have consistent kind of loads, maybe say 100 MB on a daily basis or so on. So that can be done over the network using transfer acceleration. Now a question comes like this data in S3, how we can control the access of this data. There are different mechanisms, and these are the set of mechanisms. There are 7 ways to do it, and I'm pretty sure in the exam you will get few questions which will touch at least some of these areas. Okay, so in real life we connect IAM, we use IAM, that is identity access management. What we do is, we suppose we integrate with Active Directory, we create IAM, and based on that, on a particular file you can say that this user can get access or this user cannot get access. Okay, and then you can use bucket policies for the same. And access control policies, block public access is, suppose you have the file and you do not want over the web, any person over the web to access it, you just want to restrict the access to a small community, you can click block public access. Now in the exam I can see many times they ask question on query string authentication. What is this? This is a pre-signed sort of a URL where you want to give the access temporarily for 2 days to your file, and after 2 days that access should auto expire. In that case you can use query string authentication. Now the beauty of S3 is S3 can be audited via logs. You can click the audit on and it will keep logging whatever is happening. Suppose you logged in, you accessed the file, you downloaded it, you uploaded a file, whatever actions you are doing, it is getting logged. Not only you, anybody else who has access, whether they can be within your account or other accounts who have access to your S3 bucket, whatever activities they are also doing, you can log them as well. Now if you consider banking applications like Bank of America, Barclays, in India you have ICICI, SBI, HDFC, and so on. What is unique about banking applications is that data has to be absolutely secured. So there are extra security measures that has been taken by these banks to make your data secured, because these are all financial transactions. There are penalties if there are hacks happening on these banking applications. Hence, since there are so stringent security protocols to be followed, S3 provides you encryption mechanism. You have different ways you can encrypt the files or objects what is stored in S3. These are the different ways. Okay, in the exam you will definitely get questions on this. Okay, so you need to understand clearly what is the difference between SSE S3, SSEC, and so on. So first thing remember is in SSE KMS there is a key management system which is provided by AWS. It manages the keys for you. The keys are stored in KMS, and These keys are used to encrypt and decrypt your S3 objects. Okay, now SSE S3, what it does is AWS manages the keys for you. They generate the key, they manage it internally. Okay, you are not aware, they don't use KMS, but it is done internally by AWS. Now SSEC, what it does is, suppose as a client you already have a system where you can generate the keys. Okay, you want to use the same system for keys generation, you can do that very well. S3 can work with even those keys. You will have to link it up using SSEC, and you as a client will be the owner of these keys. Okay, AWS has no responsibility there, but AWS will use those keys to provide encryption and decryption. And the last but not the least, there is a feature called S3 encryption client. I think this stores the keys within the application, so that is the difference between these. Please take some time to read these topics. I have already explained the differences. That should be good enough to help you clear AWS Cloud Practitioner and AWS Solution Architect Associate exams. See, all of these cloud products, whether it be AWS, Azure, GCP, IBM Cloud, they all have one thing in common, is they try to make the system as compliant to the industry standards as possible. So GDPR is one of the norm where it says your data cannot leave Europe, and S3 allows you to do that by, you can keep the files, you can create the S3 bucket in the European region and keep the files there. So the data would reside only in the EU regions. See, consider a scenario, you have a lot of files on S3, lot of files, and what happens is you don't know which files are having confidential data, like which files have your social security numbers or national IDs, Aadhaar numbers, etc. You don't know. Your system, you as a client, has done a one-time migration from on-premises to AWS, and now what happens is you cannot do this exercise manually because you have moved terabytes of data. You need some sort of automation to go there into the files, check, do I read a social security number? Yes, I need to make it secured. In order to do that, AWS provides you a beautiful feature called Macy. It helps you secure your confidential documents. It has AI routines built in which will scan your S3 buckets and see for files which has some sort of personal identifiable information, which called PII. This is very important to understand. Any client nowadays, they want to secure their at least bare minimum PII data. In the banking applications, they do not only secure PII, but they also secure the entire set of transactions, banking transactions, and so on. S3 provides you a durability of 11 nines. Always remember, after this decimal there are 11 nines. This is the durability it provides. What you mean by durability is, even if your AZ goes down, the other AZ will have the data. Even if second AZ goes down, the third AZ will have your data. That means that it is highly impossible that you lose your data. You will not lose your data, and that is your thumb rule 39. In your AWS Cloud Practitioner exam, you will definitely get this question. See, if you're using S3, the best practice, what it suggests is, the best practice says you should always provide secure access and permissions to your files that you have. That is point one. The other best practice is use cross-region replication. What it means is, like, from a disaster recovery perspective, if one region goes down, it's always better to have that data replicated in another region. If you remember, S3 maintains copies in 3 different AZs which are physically different. Okay, now the problem is, what if the entire region goes down? Like suppose in US there is a major network issue and all the region goes down, or there is a major power failure in India and all the region goes down. So your customers who are global, they will not be able to access the application. Hence, it is always better to do a cross-region replication. Whatever data you have in India, you will have the replica in London. Okay, that's how you can do it. Then always remember to create versioning. That is the only way you can prevent, or that is one of the ways you can prevent accidental deletes. Even if somebody accidentally deletes it, you will still have the versions. Okay, and try to maintain systems which regularly backs it back. Maybe that means that always a backup is created at a particular frequency and kept somewhere, so that if anything gets messed up, you can still go to the backup and recover. Now think about it. Whenever you are saving a file in your Windows Explorer, in your Windows system, you must have seen there are some times when your file gets corrupted. Can the file get corrupted in S3? Can it happen? Obviously, these are all systems. It can happen, but how does AWS ensure that it doesn't happen? It does content MD5 checksums and CRCs to detect data corruption. You can get a question on it. I did get a question on it in my exam. You can get a question on it. I have some of my colleagues who have recently given exams on AWS Cloud Practitioner and AWS Solution Architect Associate, and they did get a question around this. Okay, so always remember, S3 does MD5 to detect data corruption. Now, like I explained, versioning is one of the ways to prevent accidental deletes. Accidental deletes is a concern when you're having data getting stored in S3. So versioning is one of the way, but what about the other way? MFA, multi-factor authentication. This is one of the way, a very important way to stop you from deleting. So what happens is when you accidentally delete, the multi-factor authentication will get suppose an OTP, and it will say please enter the OTP before you delete it, or it will tell you that you type delete and then it will be deleted. That's an additional mechanism. Okay, now we were looking at different storage classes. Okay, S3 intelligent tiering is one of the storage class. Now why do we use S3 intelligent tiering? Because see, suppose you as a client, okay, you have moved your data from on-prem to cloud and you're not pretty sure that should I use S3 standard, should I use one zone IA, should I use Glacier fast retrieval, what should I use? You don't know. So you have like terabytes of data and you cannot be going manual about this. You got to go in an automated fashion. Use S3 intelligent tiering in the first go because you have historical files. Let S3 intelligent tiering decide which storage class it will use for which files. Once your mechanism is set up, okay, maybe 3 months down the line, you can choose to decide the storage class for any future files yourself. Okay, always remember, if you do it yourself, it is cheaper. If you order food from outside, it is costlier. If you cook at home, it is cheaper. So S3 intelligent tiering is like ordering food from outside. Okay, and S3 intelligent tiering has no minimum duration. What is minimum duration? If you see certain storage classes like Glacier, in Glacier the minimum duration is 180 days. Okay, you cannot think that okay, I'll keep it in Glacier for 15 days and I will get out. You will be charged. Okay, that is on the pro rata basis, you will be charged. So 180 days is the minimum period there. In some storage class, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days is the minimum period. S3 intelligent tiering has no minimum period. That's why I'm saying best practices. The first move you are doing from on-premises to S3, use S3 intelligent tiering. Let its AI-based mechanism decide which storage class to use where. Do it for 2-3 months. After 2-3 months, take the control on yourself for any future incremental files. Now, one zone is 20% less cost-effective compared to standard IA, because see, one zone is keeping your data in only one availability zone. Standard IA is keeping your data in 3 availability zones. That's why one zone is cheap and standard IA is relatively costly. Now, like I told, Glacier you should use only if you want cold storage, like you have to store it for a long time. Suppose there is a banking requirement. RBI says in India that your data should be stored at least for 7 years. So if you have that kind of requirement where you will not be accessing that data regularly, maybe once a year you will be accessing, or once in 3 years, then you keep it in Glacier. Now what if you have a requirement where you keep it for a long time, but whenever you want to access it, you want milliseconds, it should get access in milliseconds. So you have instant retrieval feature in Glacier. It is relatively costlier with other storage classes of Glacier, but it will provide you millisecond retrieval. And it also maintains 3 copies, one each in availability zones which are physically differently located, and it provides 99.9% availability with 11 nines of durability. Okay, now across the storage classes, if you want to put the data, you can use put command. You can upload directly using management console. You can use API commands like put, or you can use a lifecycle policy. It will automatically get transition after 30 days. Suppose you set a lifecycle policy that anything that is in S3 standard, after 30 days it should automatically transition to standard IA. It will happen. You can set a lifecycle policy, it will happen. Now there is a storage class. There is a storage class called flexible retrieval in Glacier. What it does is it gives you flexibility. It gives you an option called expedited retrieval. Okay, what it means is I'm storing it in the fridge, in the cold storage. But when I want to have my fries, your potato fries, Keventers, suppose that's the brand has which manufactures these potato fries packed. You keep it in your freezer. Now you want expedited retrieval, like whenever I want to eat, now I should be able to do it in 1 to 5 minutes. You said use this and it will do it for you. But if you use standard retrievals, it will take 3 to 5 hours to retrieve, and if you use bulk retrievals, it will complete in 5 to 12 hours. But bulk is free of charge. Bulk retrieval is free of charge. Why they are giving you free of charge? Because they don't want to, they want you to use bulk retrievals. They don't want you to use expedited retrievals that frequently, because the whole purpose, because many times what happens is people just use expedited even though they don't have a need. So they have purposely kept this bulk free, so that whenever you are seeing the cost are low, that means you yourself are responsible for your choice. AWS gave you an option to save your cost by using free bulk retrieval, but you chose to use standard retrieval maybe. Now there is another thing called Glacier Deep Archive. Okay, this Deep Archive is a storage class. Okay, what it does is it will give you long-term data retention features. For example, if you, like I gave an example, RBI in India tells you that you should have your data for 7 to 10 years. Whatever data, like now it's 2022, but you should still store data of 2014, 2015. That is a regulation. You currently you may not be doing anything with that data, that is just stored in a cold storage, but you have to store it. So why will you pay expensive storage for that? You should, if you keep it in standard IA or S3 standard, you will be paying a lot more. So you have a cheaper option, Deep Archive. That means it is the tundra region. If you go to North Pole or if you go to tundra region, it's a Deep Archive. Okay, it's same to that. If you have contractual obligation, corporate policy, regulatory compliance, you keep that data there. Save your costs, and you will definitely get some questions around this which tests your knowledge, like which Glacier is cheaper. uh, I have, the question says like I have regulatory requirements and I want to store data for long term. Now out of these Glacier are of different storage classes, which storage class should I use? Definitely will get this question. See, if you have the data in Glacier Deep Archive, you initiate a restore request using S3 API. Okay, or in S3 management console, you can click restore. The restore will create a temporary copy in S3 one zone IA. It will not create it in S3 standard. One zone is cheap storage class, and your data will still be intact in Deep Archive. It will just create a copy in one zone IA so that you can access it from there. And the last thumb rule for this video I'm covering here is objects are archived in Deep Archive. You have a minimum period of 180 days of storage. Okay, you cannot just tell only for 2 days I'll put it in Deep Archive. No, the billing is minimum 180 days. You have to do it for 180 days. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll take a pause here. I'll end this video here. I'll be publishing one more video which will talk about some advanced concepts around S3 that is important for your AWS Solution Architect Professional Exam, and to some extent AWS Solution Architect Associate Exam as well. This video will help you with AWS Cloud Practitioner, that is the first basic exam, and AWS Solution Architect Associate exam. You can also use this video to clear your concepts around AWS Solution Architect Professional exam, because the concepts will be definitely helpful there. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to stay tuned to many such informative contents. This channel is totally dedicated to help you clear cloud certifications. This brings us to the end of this part. Remember, this is a certification essential. Instead of doing a lot of training on other platforms, also do this, because what I assure you is, if you're doing this S3, that's the thumb rules, it will help you fly successfully. You may not need a lot of other courses. So you can do this essential and go through my videos on the questions and how do I attack each and every question, how do I scan through the options, understand the keywords, understand the story, and arrive at the right option. That is the key. See you in the next part.